Alright, today I'm going to continue on with this A7 and see if I can get some definition out of it. It sounds sonically pretty dead, so I'm going to have to get the the combo amp and power supply board out of it to make some cap changes, and then go from there to see what the tone control might need. Apparently it's got some light bulbs out too, so I have to address that issue. Now one other thing too, I'm going to have to switch this system A and B around and lay system A out on top and system B out on the bottom. That's what works for me. Looks like it only has one bulb in it. I was thinking it might have two, but it's got one bulb up here in the corner, so I'll pop that out and see if we can't find a suitable replacement for that. I'm not sure if that's going to be an issue or not. It's probably like 4 millimeters or so, 4.5 maybe. So we got 4.12 roughly. I have to dig around and see what I can find. Alright, this seemed to be a good choice here. I think this is, yeah, JKL 2178, 8 volts at 85 milliamps. That way I don't have to put a dropping resistor on it. We'll see if this one is big or is bright enough. I kind of think it will be. So I just put 2 pieces of Teflon tube on it and shot a little bit of Vaseline in the grommet there. So we'll put this guy in, see how that works. So sometimes when you're soldering these little tiny light bulb wires, the solderability on them just doesn't really seem to be too good. It almost acts like there's chromium in the leads, and I don't know, there very well could be. So it's always a good idea to tin things real good before you try to solder the wires to it. That did pretty well. Definitely far better than what it was, considering it wasn't lit up at all. So I think we'll stick with that one. I caught this on some other ones, but I don't think it was the case on that bulb there that I just used being obsolete. So I think that bulb is still currently produced. Just FYI. Now moving on to the amp board, kind of looks like this is not going to be a real quick process. Kind of looks to me like we got to pop these screws from here to release that heat sink support. Pop these 2 screws out to take that off of there. Pull the screws out of the bottom cover brackets that are holding the board and the heat sink down, and then lift this whole thing out of there. Disconnect at least these 3 cables, and then somehow at some point I've got to get the heat sink off the transistors so I can get to the back side of the board. So that's the theory behind this. But it looks like in order to get this out, we're going to have to release the cord grip here. Now, getting these cord grips out can be a real experience sometimes, and it looks like this is going to be one where it's going to be a real experience, because they round the front edge of the cord grip, which doesn't help you out any, because you just simply can't get on it with a pair of pliers or anything, because it's made of nylon and everything just slips to the front. So I'm going to try a pair of vice grips on it and see if I can get it out. That seemed to be the answer there. You can see how hard these cord grips hold. That's pretty incredible to do a crimp like that in that wire. Now, interesting, that reminded me of something. When I tried to get the cord out of a G77, I ran into the most elaborate cord trap I've ever seen. I can't even really explain what it consisted of, but just basically a plastic channel where they like sent a cord in multiple directions through this trap so that the cord could not pull out of the G77. And I had to defeat that cord trap to get an EIC or an IEC. I get them backwards. Cord connector on the back, just to have a removable line cord from the G77. So I had to get the original power cord out, and that was a real experience. So it looks like we'll just pop these two screws out here, and that should loosen something on the heatsink assembly. Now that loosened up this whole entourage of stuff, but the only way I see that this is going to come out of there is I'm just going to have to take the bottom cover the whole way off, because there's some ribbon cables down here on the bottom that are going to need to come out, and then I'll have to pop these off also. So you just need to pop the little latches on these and pull these wires out. I would keep them out of the way so they don't get messed up, or you're going to have a, so they don't rub against stuff and get all beat up. Otherwise you're going to have a hard time getting them back in there since they're tinned up so nice. So there's that. We'll just see what that did to loosen up the heatsink from the other side. This thing kind of this is like a real mess. I'm just wondering, should I even went down this road today? Because I'm just not even sure what it's going to take to get this thing out of there. So that's the answer. That's what it's going to take to get this out of there. Now this is kind of the part of the project, and I'm sure there's got to be somebody that experiences this. This is kind of like the part of the project where you start to feel that feeling of being a little overwhelmed, and it's only going to get better. So it kind of looks like this. Kind of looks like these board screws are going to have to come out here, and the transistor screws are going to have to come out. The bias transistor screws are going to have to come off, and then something should fall apart. So there we are. So I'm probably not going to place this amplifier real high on the easeability to repair index, but nevertheless. The first thing I got to do is find C1 here, which is the coupling cap into those two SA798s, and figure out what to do about that. And that looks to be these right here. So we're going to take them out. Alright, I replaced C1 coupling caps into the differential pair. I put some RFS electrolytics in there. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I would prefer to put a film cap in there, but I'm going to try the electrolytics first. That would be C1 here. I also replaced C2, which is a 220p at a with a film and foil polypropylene. Normally putting a polypropylene here is not common practice, especially when there's an electrolytic here. This is just a swamping cap that gives you your high frequency roll off, but I have a feeling this electrolytic isn't going to work out for me, and I'm going to have to put a film cap in there. So I just went ahead and put a polypropylene in here, so at least that's done down the road. So right there's the polypropylenes, or film and foils. So that's pretty much all there is to that. Now we want to look for an electrolytic which is feeding back to the bias chain, which is going to be C9 here. That's 100 mic at 50. We want to find that on the board and take that out. So it looks like C9 is going to be this guy and this guy over here. Now there's hundreds at 50 are right here is one, which is C9, and right there is the other one. So we're going to put a pair of UKZs in, 100 at 50. So the reason I do this is because it gives you much better bass definition. Putting those electrolytics in there. Alright, we just put some new heatsink compound on them, and it looks like it's time to put it back together. So I just started with the bottom of the board first. Put these two screws in here on the ends. There were some tooth washers on the back, some external tooth lock washers that fell off. So I had to kind of solder around them to get the tooth washers to stay on the board until I got the screws through the hole. So just put the board screws in on the top, along the top rung, and snug the transistors back down, and put this hold down clip back on. And that's pretty much that. Now, one word of caution, because I've been down that road before. It's always a good idea to watch what your tightening down torque is on these, because it's not completely impossible to strip one of these holes out in that heatsink. I've had that happen before. So, and it's not completely impossible to get a short on here either. Extremely unlikely, but not impossible. So it's always a good idea to make sure you don't have any continuity between your collectors and your heatsink. So I guess we're at the point it's time to create a parts bag. That's always a good idea to do that. So now it's time just to weasel this back together. It kind of looks to me like the best thing to do is to get this positioned in there and attach the screws to the back of the bracket to hold the thing in place. So we just fastened those two screws back in to hold the heatsink in. There was a little bit of slop up and down play, so I don't know if that's going to make a difference in lining up the rest of the screws, but we'll figure that out in a minute. So the next step is just getting our our wires lined back up to go back into these sockets. If you do this, make sure you get the wire in there right, because sometimes it's hard to figure that out. So that seems to be a little bit of a challenge because there's just too many shadows. Alright, successful mission there. That's why I said in the beginning, don't mess up your wires if you pull them things out. They are tinned, but if you mess around with them, you get them all bent out of shape, and then it's just harder to get them in. And it's kind of hard to see in the shadows to tell if you're actually in the socket side or if you're in the clip side with the wires. So you just have to be careful. Here's really the best view I can give because of the angle of it, but just not to be stupid, but just make sure, because it's not really that impossible to do, is to have your wire fall across this side and not realize that it's not in the socket side of the connector. I mean, it's not completely impossible to do that, especially if you were in a hurry. So just make sure the wires are seated the whole way down in and firm, and then just clip them down tight. That's all there is to that. So it looks like it's time to put the cord connector back on. It just makes reasonable sense to make sure you put the grommet back in the the same spot that it came off of. Otherwise you're going to have to re-crimp through this wire and you're going to pull your hair out. So just put the grommet back on it exactly where the crimp was, and that way it'll be easier to fit back in the slot like so. Now all that's left is just put your terminal board back on, and that's all there is to that one. So once again, not to be stupid, but it's just always a good idea when you take something like this apart to establish what the general direction of all the caps is, because typically they'll all run in the same direction, but depending upon what you're working on, they may not. So if you can just do a visual and see that the negative sides are all going towards this side of the unit, it'll help you spot dumb mistakes like sticking a cap in backwards or something. There was a little bit of a lineup issue, and I kind of knew this when I put these two screws in here to hold the heatsink support bracket in. So there was some issue getting these all lined up once you got these heatsink notches down in the bottom cover holes, getting this bottom cover on there centered up with the original screw holes was a little bit, so I just had to loosen these up to give it enough wiggle room. So mission complete.